In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can create such a map with ggplot. Not only is this a map of the United States, it's also a map where certain parts of the United States are colored differently, and also we have some wild patterns inside of some of the states. If you ask me, this makes for a kind of cool look, but you can also use this technique for something serious, which I have done in another video where I recreated a chart from the Pew Research Center. But here in this video, we are just working on the technique itself, and then if you want to do the serious stuff, you can check out the other video. So let's dive into today's video. So in my quarter file, I've already put in a code chunk that loads the tidyverse, and the next package that we also need is the US map package. This package makes plotting maps of the US really easy, and that's why I really enjoy it. You see, once you load it, you can just use the plot US map function and then specify regions, like for example the states. And if you execute this, you will get a map of the United States with just one line of code, which I think is incredibly useful. And what's more, you can also change the regions argument to say the counties, and then you will even get a county-based level, which I think is even more incredible. Basically, this plot US map function is one of two functions that we mostly need from the US map package. As you've just seen, this plot function makes it really easy to plot the map, but if you want to get the data, there's a different function for that, namely the US map function. And in there you can again specify if you want to have the states regions or the counties. In my case, I will just take the states, throw this in there, and then as you can see in the console, what we get is a so-called simple feature collection. Be aware that if your output is a little bit different and you just get a long data frame, then update your US map package, because this will give you this nicer format here. In the other video that I've mentioned, I've actually used the older version of this. It still works the same, the code is just a little bit different, but the principles are the same. Even though this data set looks a little bit different, you can just treat it like the tibble that is in here. And when you pass this to ggplot, you will need a special GM layer that can handle this GM column type here. But at first, this simple feature collection works just like any other data set. So you just take the output and pass it to ggplot, where you add a layer on top of this. And this now is the GMSF layer, which can handle these multi-polygons here. And if you execute this, then you get a nice map of the United States. And even though this is a map now, you can see that by the way the coordinate system looks, most of the things that you know from ggplot still work the same. For example, you could throw the minimal on top of that, and then the gray background will be gone. Or you could increase the base size and set the base family to some nice font so that it looks more like a coordinate system. You see, this IBM Plex mono font looks kind of nicer here. It kind of fits the bill of having a map here. But that's totally optional. The point here was that this is just a ggplot, and you can use all of the things that you know from ggplot with this map here. For example, if we take a look at the data set again, we can see that we have a column called full that has the state names inside of it. And now if we wanted to change the fill color of all of these polygons that are plotted here, we could just map the fill aesthetic to the full column here, and then just like is typical in ggplot, we get what we want. To prove that to you, let me actually set the fill aesthetic, and then if we execute this, you will get a chart, but also a whole lot of names inside of the legend. So this is why we add a theme layer where we set legend position to none, because really we don't need labels here right now. Alright, cool. Right now we have a lot of colors inside of our map. But what I've said in the beginning of this video is that we want to have a couple of groups that get the same color and the same pattern, and not every state gets something else. So this is why we should probably make sure that we have a new column inside of our data set that corresponds to these groups. The easiest way to make that happen is to just take this data set here. Again, even though this is a simple feature, we can see here that there is a tibble, and this means that we can just throw this tibble into the mutate function and it will work like it normally would. So this is why we take the output of this here and pass it to mutate, where we create a new column which we call group. And here I use the sample function to sample from the names A, B, C, and D. And I sample exactly 51 times because that's the amount of states that I have. And of course, I need to make sure that I sample with replacement. Otherwise, I cannot possibly get 51 samples from just 4 different categories. And once you execute this, you will see that you get something like this. Again, the simple feature collection, this part up here didn't change at all, but inside of the tibble, we have a group column here now, and it corresponds to just the letters A, B, C, and D, just like we wanted it to. And that way we could take this group column here and map it to the fill aesthetic instead of using the full state name. And now, once we have that, we can see that we have less colors in our map and the grouping is simply different. Oh, by the way, if you enjoyed this video so far, do me a favor and click the like button because this really helps me to make more and better videos. So thank you for that. And now let's get back to the video. And as for the grouping, we'll see that things look a little bit different when we re-execute this code because this sample here is something that is generated randomly. And that is why whenever we re-execute this code, everything will look slightly bit different. The way to make sure that everything stays the same is to simply set the seed. So this is why we've put it in here. And now if I re-execute the set seed, then I will get this image here. And now if I set the seed again and execute this code again, it will always stay the same. Of course, the image will still always change when I re-execute only the mapping part, but when I re-execute everything together with the set seed, then everything will always stay the same. Now that we have our groups, let us make the map a little bit nicer by changing the color. Here we can just throw in a scale fill manual layer where we set the values to a named vector, where we simply set for each category, for each group, some color. And then if we execute this, we'll get the nicer colors inside of our chart. All right, now let's start with the really fun part. Let's get the patterns inside of the state groups. And what we need for that is one of my most favorite packages, namely the GG pattern package. As the name implies, it can do all sorts of patterns, and what makes it really great is the names of the layers. You see, it has all of the layers that you already have from ggplot, but it simply appends the underscore pattern to the name, and then you have the same thing, but it can use patterns now. The thing is, if I execute this now, you will see that I get the same chart now. It takes a little bit to render, but once that is done, you see that you get the same chart now, but with a pattern. Before we move on to customize this chart even further, let me just mention that the GG pattern package is really cool. I've used it before in my data visualization course where I created a waffle chart with it. And I've also featured this package in another video where I go through my most favorite packages. And without a surprise, GG pattern was among these packages. And if you're curious about this other video, there should be a notification popping up right about now. But I've also put in a link to that video into the description of this video here so that you can watch this video all the way to the end. And then you can check out the other video that I mentioned. Anyway, let us customize our chart a little bit more. Let us change the patterns depending on the groups. And the thing is, because all of this is ggplot, all of this works just like you'd expect. You see there's this aesthetic called pattern for all of the functions from ggpattern. So this is why we can just map the group column to this pattern aesthetic. And once we execute this, we will see that we get different patterns for each group. Notice how the pattern is always the same for each group. So not only is the pattern type, whether it is just striped or this crisscross thing here, not only is that the same, it is also the angle at which the stripes appear is the same for all of the groups that have the same color here. In fact, the angles of the patterns are the same regardless of the group. You can see that, for example, here with the yellow and red color, where the stripes go all the way through. You could think that it's the same thing, but it's actually not. So let us also map the pattern angle to the group aesthetic. And now if we execute this, this should change. This actually changed everything because I forgot to execute the seed part as well. So let's execute everything with the seed set as well. And now you can see here that also the angle of the pattern changed and it doesn't look exactly as if it had the same pattern. And now if you wanted to have more control over which group gets which pattern, you could, just like we've done before with the fill aesthetic, set the pattern aesthetic, where we also use the values argument to specify a named vector, where we choose the patterns for each of the groups that we have. And now if we execute all of this, we get to our final image. And this is the one that I've shown you in the beginning of this video. Again, ggpattern is such an incredible package, and here I've used it to spice up the maps that the US map package can easily give us. And I've used all of these things in different videos. If you want, you can check out this video where I show you how to create an elaborate chart that also uses maps, or you could check out my most favorite packages, or in the description of this video you will also find a link to my data visualization course that might be of interest to you. So with all that said, thank you for watching and I will see you next time.